I think mentoring's changing hugely. It's a very old process. Its origins are from the Greeks, and there's been lots of kind of historic work done on mentoring. I think mentoring, because of the mentor standards, because of organisations thinking much more carefully about the mentoring process, I think the nature of mentoring itself is changing. So in organisations, they're much more familiar with things like mandatory mentoring, where we're monitoring performance, for example, where you're looking at how well someone is meeting teaching standards, or how well a department is doing in terms of monitoring and evaluation that they've put in place. But I think organisations are becoming much more creative with mentoring as a process. So instead of the traditional top-down model where you get a very senior member of staff mentoring a mentee who's much more inexperienced, what you're starting to get is much more fluid approaches. So for example, one of the most interesting is collaborative approaches. In Japan they have something called lesson study, where a group of teachers might look at a lesson that they've planned collaboratively, that they deliver collaboratively, or they observe each other doing the lesson, and then they would evaluate that. So the mentoring process is much more equalised. You don't have the power relationships that sometimes can happen in a mentoring process. Another example might be something that's termed mosaic mentoring. Mosaic mentoring is where you identify that someone needs very specific kinds of development in certain areas. So you would get different individuals to do each bits, bring the bits together for that mentoring process. So you get a mosaic of, for example, you might have a student who needs development in behaviour management. They also need to look at their teaching and literacy. They need to consider how they operate in the wider sense of the organisation. So you bring together your very best personnel, and they mentor, they give the student the benefit of the different approaches from the different people. So I think it's changing in very good ways. I think it's becoming much more thoughtful, much more reflective as a process. I think its impact is also growing because of that change in how it's operating in organisations. If mentoring is used in a very performative sense, then there may be a reticence on the part of the mentee to reveal things about what they need to develop, or lack of confidence that they're feeling. Whereas I think in collaborative mentoring or more informal mentoring, you might get a much more open-ended approach. And also one of the useful things that is happening is where a more junior member of staff is mentoring a more senior member of staff in a particular skill. So for example, a recent head of department was being mentored by a younger member of staff who had a great deal of experience in pastoral care of pupils. So he was mentoring the new senior manager in that area because it was something that that person didn't bring with them. And I think opportunities like that take away the power base, they take away the barriers that might happen between a senior member of staff and a more junior member of staff. How does your organisation want to deal with mentoring? What kinds of mentoring do they need, and in what ways can they integrate new forms of mentoring in order to meet the needs of the organisation more effectively?